They called her the Ghost Girl. For 20 years, Seraphina Valen had been invisible to the Shadowvale pack, nothing more than a whisper in the corridors, a shadow scrubbing bloodstains from the training hall floors. She was the wolf-less Omega, the broken one, the girl whose inner beast never answered no matter how many times she screamed into the void of her own soul. They spat on her. They starved her. They made her sleep in a cellar beneath the kitchen where rats nested in the walls. But they didn't know what slept inside her veins. They didn't know that the silence in her chest wasn't emptiness. It was a prison holding something ancient, something hungry. When Alpha Draven Blackwood rejects her before the gathered lords of 5 territories, he believes he's discarding trash. Instead, he's lighting a fuse. And what explodes from the ashes isn't a whimpering Omega begging for scraps. It's the Void Wolf, the devourer of light. The beast that hasn't walked this earth in 2,000 years, and she is starving. The great hall of Shadowvale Manor reeked of cedar polish and simmering resentment. Seraphina, Sarah to the few who bothered learning her name, dragged a mop across the marble floors, her reflection a pale smear in the stone. Her knuckles were split from scrubbing, her back ached from hunching. She was 20 years old, and she had never once felt the sun on her face without flinching, expecting a blow to follow. Tonight was the Bonding Moon ceremony. Once every 5 years, the alphas of the 5 great territories gathered to witness unmated wolves find their fated pairs. It was a night of silk gowns, crystal goblets, and promises sealed in moonlight. For Sarah, it was another night of invisible labor. "You missed a spot, Ghost Girl." The voice sliced through the silence like a blade dipped in honey. Sarah didn't need to look up. She knew that voice better than her own heartbeat. Talia Crane, daughter of the Pax Beta. Future Luna, if she had anything to say about it. Talia's stiletto heel clicked against the marble as she circled Sarah like a vulture. "Honestly, I don't know why Draven keeps you around. You can't shift, you can't fight, you can't even mop a floor properly." Sarah kept her head down, wringing the mop. "I'll fix it." "You'll fix it? What?" Sarah's jaw tightened. "I'll fix it, Beta Talia." Talia smiled, a sharp curve of crimson lips. She crouched down, gripping Sarah's chin, forcing their eyes to meet. Talia's were ice blue and cruel. Sarah's were an unusual shade of deep violet, so dark they looked almost black in dim light. "Those creepy eyes," Talia murmured. "No wonder your wolf abandoned you. Even your own beast couldn't stand looking at the world through those freakish things." She shoved Sarah's face away and straightened, smoothing her emerald gown. "Alpha Draven wants the silver polished in the banquet hall. Every piece. And if I catch you anywhere near the ceremony tonight, I'll have the guards drag you to the whipping post. Understood?" Sarah nodded, her throat burning with words she couldn't say. Talia sauntered off, her laughter echoing against the vaulted ceilings. Sarah exhaled slowly. She pressed her palm against her chest, feeling the hollow ache that had lived there for as long as she could remember. Other wolves described their inner beasts like a second heartbeat, a presence that whispered comfort and strength. Sarah felt nothing. Just silence, just emptiness, just a void. She returned to mopping, but her hands trembled. Tonight was Draven's 23rd birthday. Tonight, his fated mate would likely be revealed. The thought shouldn't have affected her. He barely knew she existed. But for the past 2 months, something strange had been happening. Every time Draven walked into a room, Sarah's chest burned. Her skin prickled. Her blood hummed with a frequency she couldn't name. She told herself it was fear. It had to be fear. Because if it was something else, if the moon goddess had cursed her with him as a mate, then Sarah's life wasn't just miserable. It was over. She finished the floors as the sun bled into twilight. Servants rushed past her carrying trays of champagne and platters of rare venison. Nobody acknowledged her. She was furniture. Less than furniture. Sarah climbed the narrow stairs to her cellar room. It was barely larger than a closet. A thin cot, a cracked mirror, a single candle. She peeled off her damp servant's dress and caught her reflection. Thin. Too thin. Her collarbone jutted sharply. Her ribs were visible beneath pale skin. Her hair, an unusual shade of deep black with an almost violet sheen, hung limp past her shoulders. The only remarkable thing about her were those eyes, violet so dark they seemed to swallow light. Freakish, Talia had called them. Maybe she was right. Sarah pulled out a dress she'd found in the donation bin 2 winters ago. It was simple. Black velvet, slightly frayed at the hem, but it was clean. She tied her hair back and made a decision that would change everything. She was going to watch the ceremony. Just once. Just to see. She crept through the servant tunnels hidden within the manor walls. These passages were her only advantage. She'd memorized every twist and turn over 20 years of hiding from fists and fury. She reached a ventilation grate overlooking the grand ballroom and pressed her face to the iron slats. Her breath caught. The ballroom was a sea of glittering wolves, gowns of ruby and gold, tuxedos sharp as daggers. Chandeliers dripping with crystals cast fractured rainbows across the crowd. The scent of 100 powerful wolves flooded her senses. Pine, smoke, musk, rain. And there, on the raised dais, sat Alpha Draven Blackwood. He was devastatingly beautiful. Dark hair swept back from a face carved from shadow and arrogance, eyes the color of molten amber. He lounged in his chair like a king bored with his own kingdom, swirling a glass of whiskey as Talia whispered something. In his ear. Sarah's chest exploded with heat. No. No. No, no. She gripped the grate, her knuckles white. The burning spread through her veins, pooling in her heart like molten iron. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't think. On the dais, Draven froze. His glass slipped from his fingers and shattered against the floor. He stood abruptly, his nostrils flaring, his amber eyes blazing as they swept the room. Then they snapped upward, directly at her. Draven's voice cut through the music like a thunderclap. Mate. The single word silenced the ballroom. 500 wolves turned toward their alpha, watching as he stared at the shadowed ventilation grate near the ceiling. His hand was pressed against his chest, his expression twisted between shock and disgust. "Find her!" Draven snarled. "Bring her to me, now!" Sarah scrambled backward, her heart slamming against her ribs. She tried to run, but the tunnel was too narrow. Heavy footsteps thundered through the walls. Hands grabbed her ankles and dragged her screaming through the passage. They didn't let her walk. They hauled her through the kitchen, past the gaping servants, and hurled her through the ballroom doors like a sack of rotting meat. She hit the marble floor hard. Pain lanced through her palms and knees. Her black velvet dress tore at the shoulder. Blood smeared across the pristine white stone. Silence. Sarah lifted her head slowly. 500 pairs of eyes stared down at her. She could smell their contempt, sharp as vinegar, thick as oil. Whispers rippled through the crowd. The ghost girl? The wolf-less servant? This must be a mistake. Get up. Draven's voice was cold enough to freeze fire. Sarah pushed herself to her feet, trembling. The bond pulsed between them, a golden thread of agony and longing that wrapped around her heart and squeezed. Every cell in her body screamed to go to him, to touch him, to submit. She forced herself to meet his eyes. Draven stood 5 feet away, his jaw locked so tight the muscle feathered beneath his skin. He wasn't looking at her with wonder or joy. He was looking at her like she was a stain on his bloodline. Talia appeared at his shoulder, her face cycling through shock, horror, and then, slowly, vicious delight. Draven, surely this is some kind of joke. She's nothing. She doesn't even have a wolf. I'm aware, Draven said through gritted teeth. He turned to his beta, Talia's father, a grizzled man named Aldrich Crane. Explain this. How is this possible? Aldrich stepped forward, sniffing the air. His face paled. The scent is unmistakable, Alpha. Jasmine and midnight rain. It's coming from her. The bond is genuine. A murmur of disbelief swept through the gathered lords. Sarah saw dignitaries from the other 4 territories watching with predatory interest. This wasn't just pack gossip anymore. This was a political catastrophe. Draven. Sarah's voice cracked. She hated how weak she sounded. I didn't choose this. I didn't. Silence. Draven stepped closer, his presence crushing her like a physical weight. Do you have any idea what you've done? Do you understand what this means? Sarah shook her head, tears burning her eyes. It means the moon goddess has a sick sense of humor. Draven turned to address the crowd, his voice rising to fill the hall. An alpha of Shadowvale requires a Luna who can fight beside him, who can lead, who can bear strong airs and command respect. He looked back at Sarah, his amber eyes flat and lifeless. Not a broken, wolf-less nothing who scrubs my floors. The words hit her like physical blows. She felt the bond between them twist and warp, the golden thread fraying at the edges. Draven, please, she whispered. We can figure this out. We can... There is nothing to figure out. He drew himself up to his full height. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of ancient ritual, the words that could not be unsaid. I, Alpha Draven Blackwood of the Shadowvale Pack, reject you, Seraphina Valen, as my mate and Luna. I sever the bond between us. I cast you from my presence, my pack, and my protection. The bond shattered. Sarah screamed. It wasn't grief. It was agony, pure and physical, as if someone had reached into her chest and ripped her soul in half. She collapsed to her knees, gasping, clawing at her sternum where the pain was brightest. I accept... She could barely force the words out. The ritual required her response to prevent them both from descending into madness. I accept your rejection. But Draven wasn't finished. Guards? His voice was iron. Escort this creature to the northern border. She is banished from Shadowvale territory. If she returns, kill her on sight. Gasps erupted from the crowd. Banishment was a death sentence for an Omega. Without pack protection, she would be prey for rogues, hunters, and worse. Talia stepped forward, her smile dripping with poison. You heard the Alpha. Get this trash out of our home. 2 guards seized Sarah's arms and dragged her backward toward the great doors. Her heels scraped against the marble, her vision blurred with tears and pain. Draven! She hated herself for begging, but she couldn't stop. It's the middle of winter. I'll freeze. Please, please. Draven had already turned his back. He took Talia's hand and raised it to his lips. Let the celebration continue, he announced. This unpleasantness is over. The doors slammed shut behind Sarah. The guards dragged her down the manor steps and hurled her into the snow. The cold hit her like a wall of knives, biting through the thin velvet dress instantly. She lay there, curled in the frost, listening to the muffled music resume inside. 20 years of suffering. 20 years of hoping that someday, somehow, things would get better. And now she was going to die alone in the snow, rejected and discarded like the garbage they always said she was. But deep in the hollow void of her chest, something stirred. Something that had been sleeping for a very, very long time. They heard us. The voice was ancient, female, furious. Sarah's eyes flew open. And now, little one, we make them pay. The pain started in her bones. Sarah gasped, rolling onto her back in the snow. It felt like her skeleton was being broken and reforged, like molten lead was being poured through her marrow. She opened her mouth to scream, but what emerged was something else entirely. A howl. Low at first, then building, rising through octaves that no human throat should produce. "Don't fight it," the ancient voice commanded. "Let me out! Let me out!" Sarah's spine arched violently. She heard a sickening crack as her vertebrae began to shift and elongate. Her fingers clawed at the frozen ground, but they weren't fingers anymore. They were lengthening, darkening, tipped with claws that carved furrows in the ice. Inside the ballroom, the music faltered. The chandeliers trembled. Wine glasses vibrated on their trays, some shattering spontaneously. A low vibration rolled through the manor, not a sound so much as a pressure, a weight that pressed against the eardrums of every wolf present. Draven paused mid-sentence, his amber eyes narrowing. "What is that?" Through the frosted windows, someone screamed. Outside, Sarah's transformation continued. Her black velvet dress shredded as her body expanded, muscles coiling and reforming beneath skin that was no longer skin. Fur erupted across her frame, but it wasn't gray or brown or even white. It was black. Not ordinary black. This was the black of a starless void, of the space between galaxies, of the absolute absence of light. Her fur didn't reflect the moonlight. It devoured it. Shadows seemed to bleed from her body like smoke, pooling around her growing form. She rose on 4 massive paws. Her shoulders stood nearly 7 feet from the ground, larger than any alpha, larger than any wolf in recorded history. When she opened her eyes, they blazed with white fire, twin stars burning in an endless darkness. The Void Wolf had awakened. Inside the manor, the great oak doors, reinforced with iron bands and ancient protective runes, began to groan. Boom. Something struck them from outside. The hinges screamed. Guests scrambled backward, some shifting instinctively, others frozen in primal terror. Boom! Cracks spiderwebbed across the wood. "Impossible," Aldrich whispered, his face ashen. She had no wolf. She had no wolf. Crash! The doors exploded inward. Splinters of oak and twisted iron scattered across the ballroom floor. Through the debris, wreathed in shadows that moved like living things, stepped the beast. The Void Wolf lowered her massive head. Her white fire eyes swept across the room until they found Draven Blackwood. She didn't growl. She didn't need to. The sheer presence of her, the aura of ancient, terrible power radiating from her form, hit the gathered wolves like a physical force. Omegas collapsed instantly, whimpering. Betas dropped to their knees, unable to resist, the primal command to submit. Even the alphas from the visiting territories staggered, their faces twisted in shock and fear. Only Draven remained standing, though his legs trembled visibly. Sweat beaded on his brow. His wolf was screaming at him to kneel, to bare his throat, to submit to the superior predator. "What?" His voice cracked. "What are you?" The Void Wolf took a step forward. The marble floor cracked beneath her paw. Shadows rippled outward from the point of impact like dark water. She opened her jaws, not to bite, but to speak. The voice that emerged was layered, harmonic, ancient and young at once. "I am what you threw away!" Talia screamed, cowering behind a pillar. "Kill it! Someone kill it!" But no one moved. No one could move. Then, from the upper balcony, a slow clapping echoed through the devastated ballroom. Every eye turned upward. A man stood in the shadows of the mezzanine, leaning against the railing with casual elegance. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a black suit that seemed to drink the light. His hair was dark as a raven's wing, and his eyes, when they caught the chandelier's glow, flickered with an inner silver luminescence. He vaulted over the railing, landing soundlessly on the ballroom floor between the Void Wolf and the cowering crowd. He didn't bow. He didn't kneel. He smiled. 2,000 years, he said softly, his voice carrying effortlessly through the silence. 2,000 years I've searched. He turned to face the massive wolf, and his smile widened with something like reverence. Hello, little Void. I've been waiting for you. The Void Wolf studied him. Her white fire eyes flickered, not with aggression, but with something else. Recognition. And then her legs buckled. The shadows receded. Her massive form began to shrink and reshape, bones cracking in reverse, fur retreating into pale skin. The transformation was brutal, graceless, and when it ended, Sarah lay naked and shivering on the ruined floor, her dark hair spread around her like spilled ink. The stranger moved before anyone else could react. He shrugged off his long black coat and wrapped it around her trembling body, scooping her into his arms as if she weighed nothing. Who? Draven found his voice, stepping forward with false bravado. Who the hell are you? That woman is a member of my pack. You have no right. Your pack? The stranger's voice dropped to a deadly whisper. The temperature in the room plummeted. Frost began to creep across the windows. You rejected her. You banished her. You threw her into the snow to die. He turned, and his silver eyes locked onto Draven with the weight of ancient judgment. She belongs to no one now. Especially not you. He began walking toward the shattered doorway, Sarah unconscious in his arms. Guards! Draven shouted. Stop him! No one moved. The stranger paused at the threshold. He looked back over his shoulder. My name is Caspian Vire, Alpha King of the Northern Realm, and this woman is now under my protection. His eyes glittered with cold promise. Pray we never meet again, little Alpha, because next time I won't be so merciful. He vanished into the night, carrying the ghost girl with him, leaving the Shadowvale pack in frozen, terrified silence. And in Draven's chest, where the severed bond still ached like a phantom limb, a new emotion bloomed. Not relief. Regret. Sarah woke to warmth. That alone was enough to make her believe she was dreaming. She hadn't been truly warm in 20 years, not in the drafty cellar, not in the thin servant's clothes, not under the single threadbare blanket she'd been allotted. But this warmth was different. It seeped into her bones, thawing parts of her she hadn't realized were frozen. She opened her eyes. The ceiling above her was vaulted stone, carved with intricate runes that seemed to pulse with faint silver light. She was lying in a bed that could have swallowed her cellar room whole, massive oak frame, mattress soft as clouds, sheets that felt like liquid moonlight against her skin. She shot upright, gasping. Pain flared through her muscles, the aftershock of something catastrophic. Careful. A deep voice, smooth as aged whiskey. Your body is still recovering. The first shift is always brutal, but yours was exceptional. Sarah's head snapped toward the source. The man from the ballroom, Caspian Vire, sat in a leather armchair beside a roaring fireplace. He'd changed from his suit into something simpler, a charcoal sweater that stretched across broad shoulders, dark trousers, boots that had seen miles of hard terrain. Without the formal attire, he looked less like a king and more like a predator at rest. His silver eyes watched her with unsettling intensity. Sarah pulled the sheets up to her chin, suddenly aware she was wearing nothing but a silk nightgown she didn't recognize. Where am I? What happened? How did I? One question at a time. Caspian rose, moving to a side table where a crystal pitcher sat. He poured water into a glass and brought it to her, moving slowly, deliberately, as if approaching a wounded animal. You're in Valdris Keep, my stronghold in the Northern Realm. You've been unconscious for 2 days. 2 days? Your shift wasn't ordinary, Seraphina. You didn't just transform. You erupted. He handed her the glass. Drink. You're dehydrated. She took the water with trembling hands. Memories crashed through her mind in fragmented waves. The rejection, the snow, the agony, the voice in her head, the power. I shifted, she whispered. I actually shifted. You did far more than shift. Caspian returned to his chair, crossing one ankle over his knee. You manifested a void wolf, a creature that hasn't existed for 2 millennia. A creature most wolves believe is a myth. Sarah stared at him. I don't understand. I was wolfless. For 20 years, I had nothing. No voice, no presence, no. You were suppressed. Caspian's jaw tightened, anger flickering in his silver gaze, not at her, but for her. Someone fed you eclipse root. Small doses, probably mixed into your food since childhood. It's a poison specifically designed to keep a wolf dormant. Undetectable, unless you know what to look for. The glass nearly slipped from Sarah's fingers. Poison? Someone did this to me on purpose? The question is who and why. Caspian leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Seraphina, what do you know about your parents? The familiar ache bloomed in her chest. Nothing. I was told they were low-ranking wolves who died in a rogue attack when I was an infant. The old Alpha of Shadowvale took me in out of charity. Lies. The word was flat, final. Every word of it. Sarah's breath caught. Caspian reached into his pocket and withdrew a pendant on a silver chain. He held it up, letting it catch the firelight. The pendant was obsidian, carved into the shape of a crescent moon being swallowed by shadow. This was found wrapped in your blanket when you were discovered as a baby, Caspian said. The old Alpha hid it. His son, Draven, probably doesn't even know it exists. What is it? The crest of the Nyx bloodline. Caspian's voice dropped to something almost reverent. The Void Wolves, the original rulers of our kind, before the territories split, before the councils formed. They were the moon goddess's chosen executioners, wolves who could bend shadow and darkness to their will. They were wiped out 2,000 years ago by a coalition of jealous alphas who feared their power. Sarah shook her head, the room spinning. That's impossible. I'm nobody. I'm a servant. I clean floors. You were hidden. Caspian stood, moving to the window. Beyond the glass, Sarah could see a landscape of jagged mountains and endless snow, lit by a moon so bright it turned the world to silver. Someone wanted to protect you, or contain you. The eclipse root kept your wolf asleep. The rejection, the trauma, it burned the poison out of your system like a fever breaking. He turned back to her, his expression grave. You are not nobody, Seraphina. You are the last daughter of the Nyx bloodline, and there are people who will kill to ensure you never rise. Sarah set the glass down, her hands shaking too badly to hold it. Why are you telling me this? What do you want from me? Caspian was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer. 18 years ago, I received a prophecy from the seer of the frozen lake. She told me that a void wolf would rise in my lifetime, a wolf who would either unite the fractured territories under one banner or plunge our entire species into extinction. He met her eyes. I've been searching ever since. Every rumor, every whisper, every hint of shadow magic. And then, 2 nights ago, I felt your awakening like a thunderclap in my soul. Felt it? Caspian's jaw tightened. The Alpha King is bound to the land, to its magic. When you shifted Seraphina, you didn't just break free. You screamed across the ether. Every wolf with a shred of mystical sensitivity felt it. His silver eyes darkened. Including our enemies. A chill ran down Sarah's spine. Enemies? The sanctum of purity. A cult of fanatics who believe only certain bloodlines deserve to exist. They were the ones who orchestrated the genocide of the Void Wolves 2,000 years ago. They've been waiting, watching, hunting for any sign of your bloodline's return. Caspian's hands curled into fists. They will come for you, Seraphina. It's not a question of if, but when. Sarah pressed her palm against her chest, feeling the strange new presence that pulsed there. The wolf, her wolf, no longer silent but humming with dark power. What do I do? She whispered. Caspian extended his hand toward her. You have two choices. I can give you gold, a new identity, and safe passage to the human world. You can disappear, live a quiet life, and pray they never find you. He paused. Or you can stay. Train with me. Learn to control the power inside you. And when the time comes, you can stop running and start hunting. Sarah looked at his hand. She thought of 20 years of cold floors and empty bellies. She thought of Talia's sneer, Draven's disgust, the word nothing spit at her like venom. She thought of the voice in her head, ancient, furious, hungry. No more kneeling, the Void Wolf growled. Never again. Sarah took Caspian's hand. His grip was warm, steady, electric. Teach me, she said. Teach me how to become something they'll never forget. Caspian smiled, a rare expression that transformed his harsh features into something almost beautiful. Then we start tonight. But first... An alarm shattered the moment. Red lights flashed through the corridors. A distant horn bellowed 3 times. Caspian's smile vanished. He tapped an earpiece. Report. A frantic voice crackled through. Perimeter breach at the southern gate, my king. It's the Shadowvale Pack. Alpha Draven is demanding the return of his Luna. He's brought 50 warriors. Sarah's blood turned to ice. Caspian looked at her, his silver eyes glittering with something between amusement and challenge. It seems your former Alpha doesn't understand the word rejection. He offered her his arm. Shall we educate him? The throne room of Valdris Keep was carved from living mountain stone, its walls embedded with veins of black crystal that pulsed with faint rhythmic light. Massive braziers flanked an obsidian throne that seemed to drink the firelight rather than reflect it. Sarah stood at the base of the dais, no longer in a silk nightgown but clad in black leather armor that Caspian's servants had provided. It fit her like a second skin, making her feel less like a servant and more like something dangerous. The Void Wolf purred approval in her chest. Open the gates, Caspian commanded from his throne. Let the pup have his audience. The iron doors groaned open. Cold wind rushed in, carrying snowflakes and the scent of angry wolves. Draven Blackwood strode into the throne room like he owned it. He was flanked by his Beta Aldrich and a contingent of Shadowvale warriors, all bristling with barely contained aggression. Draven's amber eyes swept the room until they landed on Sarah. He froze. She watched his expression cycle through shock, hunger, and possessive fury. She knew she looked different. The hollows of her cheeks had filled slightly from actual meals. Her hair was clean and braided back like a warrior's, and her violet eyes now held flecks of white fire that hadn't been there before. But more than her appearance, it was her presence that had changed. She no longer stood hunched and small. She stood tall, shoulders back, chin raised, like someone who had realized she wasn't prey. Seraphina. Draven's voice was rough. He took a step forward. That's close enough. Caspian's command echoed off the stone walls. He hadn't raised his voice, but the authority in it was absolute. Draven's jaw clenched. He forced himself to stop, turning his glare toward the throne. You have something that belongs to me, Alpha King. Do I? Caspian's tone was almost bored. I seem to recall you throwing her into the snow to die. Discarded property belongs to no one. The rejection was premature. Drevin's hands curled into fists. She hadn't shifted. The bond wasn't fully formed, which means it couldn't be fully severed. By ancient law, she's still my mate. Sarah stepped forward before Caspian could respond. Her voice rang clear and cold through the throne room. I'm not your anything, Draven. Draven's eyes snapped to her. Something flickered in their amber depths. Surprise, perhaps, at hearing her speak without trembling. Sarah, listen to me. No. The word cut through the air like a blade. You listen. For 20 years I slept in a cellar. I ate scraps. I was beaten and mocked and treated like vermin, and you did nothing. You looked right through me like I didn't exist. She descended one step from the dais, then another. And then, when the moon goddess revealed our bond, when you should have protected me, you called me a broken nothing. You threw me out to freeze to death. You didn't reject a mate, Draven. You sentenced an innocent woman to execution. Draven's face twisted. I didn't know what you were. If I had known... If you had known I was powerful, you would have kept me. Sarah's voice dropped to something lethal. But I wasn't powerful then, was I? I was just a wolf-less servant. And that was enough reason to kill me. She stopped 10 feet from him, close enough to see the sweat beading on his brow. That tells me everything I need to know about you, Alpha Draven. You don't want a mate. You want a trophy. And I refuse to be mounted on your wall. A murmur rippled through the Shadowvale warriors. No one had ever spoken to their alpha like this, least of all the ghost girl who used to mop his floors. Draven's composure cracked. He lunged forward, grabbing Sarah's wrist. You belong to me. The bond, I can still feel it. You can't tell me you don't feel it too. Sarah looked down at his hand on her wrist. Then she looked up at him, and her violet eyes blazed with white fire. Let go. The command resonated with power, not just volume, but something deeper, something that vibrated in the bones. Draven's hand released her wrist involuntarily. He stumbled backward, gasping. What? What was that? That was a taste, Sarah said coldly. The next time you touch me without permission, I'll take the hand. Enough. A new voice cut through the tension. From the shadows at the edge of the throne room, 5 figures emerged. They wore gray robes, their faces hidden beneath deep hoods. They moved with an unnatural stillness that made Sarah's wolf bristle with unease. The Council of Ancients. Wolves so old they had witnessed the fall of the original kingdoms. Their word was law across all territories. The lead figure pulled back his hood, revealing a face like cracked parchment and eyes of pure, milky white. Blind, yet seeing everything. Elder Malachar, Caspian acknowledged, rising from his throne. Even the Alpha King showed respect to the council. Alpha King, Alpha Draven, and... Malachar's sightless eyes turned toward Sarah. A chill ran down her spine. The Void Wolf reborn. We felt your awakening, child. The entire spirit realm trembled. She is under my protection, Caspian stated firmly. She is a creature of prophecy, Malachar corrected. She belongs to no single alpha. She belongs to fate. His blind gaze swept toward Draven. You claim the bond is unsevered? Draven straightened, seizing the opportunity. Yes, Elder. The rejection occurred before her first shift. By the law of primal bonds, the severance is incomplete. She is still legally my mate. Malachar was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was like dry leaves scraping stone. The young alpha raises a valid precedent. The bond status is ambiguous. The moon goddess's magic cannot decide what she herself has not seen clearly. Then let the goddess decide. Sarah said. Every eye turned to her. Malachar tilted his head. Explain, child. Sarah's heart hammered, but her voice remained steady. If the bond is ambiguous, then let it be resolved through trial, not by lawyers or technicalities, by combat, by blood. Draven's eyes widened with predatory glee. A trial of blood? You challenge me? I do. Caspian stepped down from the dais, his expression tight with concern. Seraphina, you've shifted exactly once. Draven has been training since childhood. Let me be your champion. No. Sarah met his silver eyes without flinching. If someone else fights for me, I'll always be the weak Omega who needed saving. I'll always be the ghost girl. She turned back to face Draven. I need to bury her myself. Malachar nodded slowly. The challenge is issued. Does Alpha Draven accept? Draven smiled. A cruel, hungry, expression. Gladly. I'll try not to break you too badly, little wolf. I want you conscious for what comes after. The trial will commence at dawn, Malachar declared. In the pit of shadows, beneath Valdris Keep. Until then, both parties will be sequestered. The council withdrew as silently as they had come. Draven shot Sarah one last look of possessive hunger before his warriors escorted him out. When the doors closed, Caspian turned to Sarah, his expression unreadable. You could die tomorrow. I know. He won't hold back. Trial rules allow combat to the death. I know. Caspian studied her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he smiled. Then we have 12 hours to teach you how to kill a wolf. The pit of shadows was exactly what it sounded like. A circular arena carved deep into the mountain's heart, where no natural light had touched stone for 1,000 years. Torches lined the walls, their flames casting dancing shadows across the assembled crowd. Wolves from all 5 territories had gathered to witness the trial. The Council of Ancients occupied a raised platform at the north end. Draven's Shadow Veil contingent clustered at the eastern curve, while Caspian's northern realm wolves held the west. Sarah stood at the southern entrance barefoot on the cold stone. She wore the same black leather armor from yesterday, flexible enough for a full shift. Her hair was braided tight against her skull, and her violet eyes burned with barely contained fire. Caspian stood beside her, close enough that his shoulder brushed hers. Remember what I taught you, he murmured. He's stronger, but he's arrogant. He'll toy with you, try to humiliate you before the kill. That's your window. Sarah nodded, her throat too tight for words. And Seraphina. His hand caught her chin, turning her face toward him. His silver eyes were molten, intense. Whatever happens in that pit, you are not the ghost girl anymore. You are the Void Wolf. Fight like it. Before she could respond, he released her and stepped back. Elder Malachar's voice boomed across the arena, magically amplified. The trial of blood is sacred. Combat continues until one party yields, falls unconscious, or dies. No weapons beyond teeth and claws. The bond will be awarded to the victor. Draven emerged from the opposite entrance, shirtless, his muscled torso gleaming in the torchlight. He rolled his shoulders, cracking his neck, radiating absolute confidence. Last chance, little wolf, he called across the pit. Yield now, and I might be gentle on our wedding night. Sarah didn't respond. She simply walked forward, stepping onto the arena floor. Ready? She asked the presence in her mind. Born ready, the Void Wolf snarled. Let's eat him. Begin. Draven didn't shift immediately. He wanted to embarrass her in human form first, prove that even without his wolf, he outclassed her entirely. He charged. His speed was terrifying. 20 years of elite training compressed into a blur of motion. He aimed a vicious backhand at her face, meant to send her sprawling. Sarah dropped. Not backward. Down. She flowed beneath his strike like water, her hand shooting up to slam against his solar plexus with every ounce of force Caspian had taught her to generate. Draven's eyes bulged. Air exploded from his lungs. He staggered, clutching his chest. The crowd gasped. "How?" Draven wheezed. Sarah didn't gloat. She pressed the advantage, driving her elbow into his temple. He stumbled sideways, blood trickling from a cut above his eye. Rage ignited in his amber gaze. "Fine," he snarled. "No more games." His body erupted. Bones cracked and reformed. Fur, dark as a moonless night, rippled across his skin. In seconds, a massive black wolf stood in his place, easily 6 feet at the shoulder. He lunged, jaws gaping. Now! Sarah surrendered to the darkness. The transformation was faster this time, smoother. Shadow exploded from her body like a living shroud. When it cleared, the Void Wolf stood in the pit, taller than Draven, sleeker, her fur a black so deep it seemed to swallow the torchlight. Draven collided with her. It was like hitting a mountain. Sarah didn't budge. She absorbed his momentum, then threw him, 700 pounds of Alpha Wolf sailing through the air to crash against the arena wall. Silence. Draven scrambled to his feet, his eyes wide with genuine fear now. He circled her, snarling, looking for weakness. He found none. They clashed again and again. Draven was fast, brutal, experienced, but Sarah was something else entirely. Every time his teeth found her flesh, shadows seemed to absorb the damage. Every time she struck, her claws left wounds that smoked with dark energy. Finally, Draven made his fatal mistake. He overextended on a lunge. Sarah sidestepped, caught his throat in her jaws, and slammed him into the stone floor. She pinned him there, her massive paw on his chest, her fangs hovering over his jugular. "Kill him," the Void Wolf demanded. "End the threat. End it." Sarah tightened her grip. She could feel his pulse hammering against her teeth. One bite and it was over. But then she looked into his eyes. She saw terror. She saw a pathetic man who had built his entire identity on dominance, now confronting something that made him feel small. Killing him would be mercy. She released his throat. Instead, she pressed her paw harder against his chest, claws piercing flesh, and sent a psychic command that echoed through every wolf in the arena. Draven whimpered. His body went limp. His eyes rolled toward his belly, throat bared in absolute surrender. The crowd erupted, some in cheers, some in disbelief. Sarah shifted back to human form, standing over Draven's broken wolf body, her chest heaving. Blood, some hers, most his, streaked her skin. "This trial is concluded," Malachar announced. "The bond belongs to the Void Wolf. Alpha Draven's claim is nullified." Draven shifted back, curling into a fetal position, clutching his wounded chest. He looked, up at Sarah, with something she had never seen in his eyes before. Fear. Caspian vaulted the barrier, striding toward her with a fur cloak. He wrapped it around her shoulders, pulling her close. "You did it," he murmured against her hair. Sarah sagged against him, exhaustion crashing through her like a wave. And then, something else hit. Heat. It started in her belly, a molten pulse that spread through her veins like wildfire. Her skin prickled. Her scent exploded, flooding the arena with something intoxicating, irresistible. Jasmine, midnight rain, and something new, dark chocolate and lightning. Caspian went rigid, his pupils dilated until his silver eyes were nearly black. A low growl rumbled in his chest. "Zara!" he gritted out. "What?" Across the arena, every unmated male wolf was rising to their feet, their eyes glazed, their nostrils flared. Even some of Draven's warriors were stepping forward, drawn by instinct they couldn't control. Elder Malachar's voice cut through the chaos. The trial has triggered her cycle. The Void Wolf seeks a mate. She is in heat. Caspian snarled, a sound so primal it echoed off the cavern walls. He swept Sarah into his arms, his aura flaring outward like a shockwave of darkness. Mine. He sprinted toward the exit, barking orders at his guards. Anyone who follows dies. Anyone who touches her dies. Clear the path to the sealed chambers. Sarah buried her face in his neck, breathing in his scent, pine and winter storms. It was the only thing that soothed the inferno raging through her. Caspian, she gasped. It hurts. I know. His voice was strained, his control visibly fracturing. We need to get you to the warded room. The scent. It won't be contained much longer. They burst through a doorway into a corridor. And the world exploded. The wall beside them detonated inward. Stone and dust rained down. Through the breach poured figures in bone-white masks, their armor etched with silver symbols, the sanctum of purity. They had found her. Go. Caspian shoved Sarah behind him, his claws extending. Get to the throne room, my guards! A masked warrior fired a crossbow bolt directly at Sarah's heart. Caspian moved faster. He caught the bolt in his palm, the silver tip sizzling against his flesh. He hurled it back, embedding it in the shooter's skull. Run! Sarah ran. The heat pounded through her with every step, her vision blurring, her wolf howling with need and fury. She could hear fighting behind her. Snarls, screams, the clash of claws on armor. She burst into the throne room and found it already occupied. A figure stood before the obsidian throne, tall, skeletal, draped in white robes. His face was a mask of porcelain cracked down the center. The last Nyx, he said, his voice like nails on glass. I watched your ancestors burn 2,000 years ago. I will not allow their bloodline to rise again. He raised a staff tipped with a pulsing white gem, and Sarah's world exploded into pain. The pain was unlike anything Sarah had ever experienced. White light seared through her skull, her nerves, and her very soul. She collapsed to her knees, screaming, clawing at her temples as the masked figure advanced. Your bloodline was a mistake, the Sanctum leader hissed. The moon goddess granted the Nyx too much power, and they grew arrogant. They had to be purged. He twisted his staff, and the white gem pulsed brighter. I am Vorath, High Purifier of the Sanctum. I have waited 2 millennia for this moment. Sarah's vision fractured. She could feel her wolf retreating, howling in agony, being forced back into the cage of her mind. No, she thought desperately, not again. I won't be powerless again. Then stop fighting me, the Void Wolf snarled. Stop holding back. Let me in. Through the haze of pain, Sarah understood. She had been controlling her wolf, directing it like a weapon. But the Void Wolf wasn't a weapon. She was a partner. Sarah stopped resisting. She opened every door in her soul, every barrier she had built over 20 years of survival. She invited the darkness in, not as a guest, but as an equal. The effect was instantaneous. Shadow exploded from her body, not just around her, from her. It poured from her eyes, her mouth, her fingertips. The throne room plunged into absolute darkness, the torches snuffed out like candles in a hurricane. Vorath stumbled backward. Impossible! The suppression field should... Sarah rose to her feet. Her eyes weren't just white fire anymore. They were twin voids, swirling with galaxies of shadow and starlight. When she spoke, her voice was layered, human and wolf, ancient and new, fury and ice. You hunted my ancestors. You poisoned my childhood. You stole 20 years of my life. She raised her hand. The shadows in the room coalesced, forming massive tendrils that wrapped around Vorath's limbs, lifting him off the ground. And now you dare to enter my house? Vorath screamed, thrashing against the bonds. You don't understand. If you live, the prophecy, the war. I am the war. She clenched her fist. The shadows squeezed. Vorath's mask cracked, then shattered. Beneath it was a face so old it looked mummified, a creature that had extended his life through dark rituals and fanatical hatred. The sanctum will never stop, he gasped. Kill me, and 100 will take my place. Sarah stepped closer, her bare feet silent on the stone. Then I'll kill them too, one by one, century by century, until your poisoned legacy is nothing but ash and forgotten memory. She released him, not out of mercy, but for something worse. The shadows didn't crush him. They consumed him. They poured into his mouth, his eyes, his ears, dissolving him from the inside out. His scream lasted only seconds before there was nothing left but empty robes crumpling to the floor. The darkness receded. The torches flickered back to life. Sarah swayed, the power draining from her like water from a cracked vessel. The heat was still there, pounding through her veins, but it was no longer unbearable. It was a pulse, a promise. Sarah! Caspian burst through the throne room doors, bloodied and wild-eyed. Behind him, his onyx guard were dragging the last of the masked invaders in chains. He saw the empty robes on the floor. He saw her standing alone, shadows still curling around her ankles like loyal pets. He crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms. You're alive, he breathed against her hair. When I felt the power surge, I thought, I'm here. Sarah clutched his sweater, breathing in his scent. I'm here, Caspian. He pulled back just enough to look at her face. His silver eyes roamed over her features, the exhaustion, the tear tracks, and the flecks of white fire still burning in her violet irises. You destroyed a high purifier, he said quietly. By yourself. Do you understand what that means? Sarah shook her head. It means the sanctum will fear you now. It means the territories will respect you. It means... He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing her cheekbones. It means you're no longer a secret. You're a force. The heat flared again, and Sarah gasped. Caspian's eyes darkened. The cycle. It's not finished. No. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. It needs... I need... She couldn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Caspian swept her into his arms for the second time that night. But this time, there were no alarms, no enemies, and no interruptions. Then let me give you what you need, he murmured against her ear. Not as a king, not as a protector, as your mate. He carried her through the corridors of Valdris Keep, past the bowing guards and the whispering servants, to the royal chambers at the heart of the mountain. The doors closed behind them, and the bond that had been circling them since the moment their eyes met in that ruined ballroom snapped into place at last. 3 months later, the coronation was held at Valdris Keep, but wolves from every territory on the continent had gathered to witness it. The throne room had been rebuilt. The damage from the sanctum attack repaired. The walls now embedded with new crystals that pulsed with both silver and shadow. Sarah stood on the dais, dressed in a gown of midnight silk embroidered with constellations of silver thread. A crown of black diamond and moonstone rested on her brow, forged specifically for her, a symbol of the Nyx bloodline's return. Behind her, arranging the train of her gown, knelt Talia Crane. The former Beta's daughter had been stripped of rank and sent to Valdris as part of the reparations demanded from Shadowvale. She served now in the royal household, not as punishment, but as a reminder. Power was not given. It was taken. Talia didn't meet Sarah's eyes. She didn't dare. It's time, my queen, Talia whispered. Caspian appeared at Sarah's side. He wore black formal attire, his silver eyes gleaming with pride. He took her hand, interlacing their fingers. "Ready?" he asked. Sarah looked out at the sea of wolves, thousands of them, from the highest alphas to the lowest omegas. They had come to see the legend. They had come to see if the stories were true. "Always," she said. They stepped forward together. The crowd fell silent. "I present to you," Caspian's voice boomed across the assembly, "Queen Seraphina Vire, the Void Wolf, my mate, and sovereign of the Northern Realm." The silence held for one heartbeat. Two. Then the crowd erupted. Howls rose into the vaulted ceiling, thousands of voices raised in acknowledgement, submission, celebration. Sarah let the sound wash over her. She had dreamed of acceptance her entire life. She had never imagined it would feel like this. Movement caught her eye. In the distant shadows near the great doors, a lone figure watched. Draven Blackwood. He had not been invited, but he had come anyway. He stood apart from the crowd, his amber eyes fixed on her. There was no hatred in his gaze anymore, no possessiveness, only regret, only loss, only the crushing weight of understanding exactly what he had thrown away. He bowed his head, a single, slow nod of acknowledgement. Then he turned and walked out into the snow, disappearing into the winter he had once condemned her to die in. Sarah watched him go. She felt nothing. Not anger. Not satisfaction. Just peace. Caspian squeezed her hand, drawing her attention back. He'll spend the rest of his life knowing what he lost. Good, Sarah said simply. She turned to face her people, her kingdom, and raised her free hand. Shadows rippled from her fingertips, spiraling into the air like dark ribbons before bursting into a shower of silver sparks. The crowd roared louder. The ghost girl was gone. The Omega was a memory. The queen had risen, and every wolf in attendance knelt before her throne. If you loved this story and want more tales of rejected mates, hidden bloodlines, and satisfying revenge, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new upload. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.